The transport shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, cutting through white clouds before revealing the mountain range below. Inside, 5 alien cadets pressed against the viewports, their various appendages and sensory organs taking in the primitive world. Beneath them, Cadet Crix adjusted his breathing apparatus and flexed his 4 tentacle-like limbs. His home world of Veloth had gravity less than half of Earth's, and everything here felt heavy. Already, even standing in the shuttle made his muscles work harder than normal. Still, he had trained for this. The Galactic Coalition's first integrated military academy was an honor to attend, even if it was on this backwater planet. Beside him, Cadet Thne stood with arms crossed, his thick gray skin and powerful build making him look like a walking boulder. His species came from a heavy world where gravity was much stronger than Earth's. He had already announced to everyone that this training would be easy for him. One gravity, he had said with a laugh. My infant offspring train in harder conditions. Cadet Yura occupied a specialized seat filled with moisture, her amphibious body requiring constant hydration. Her large eyes blinked slowly as she studied the terrain below. The mountains looked dry and hostile to her water-adapted physiology. Cadet Voss, wrapped in his environmental suit that provided the methane atmosphere his species required, made a clicking sound that his translator rendered as amusement. The final cadet, an insectoid named Realm, vibrated his wings in anticipation. The shuttle landed on a concrete pad surrounded by simple buildings made of stone and wood. No anti-gravity generators, no energy shields, no automated defense systems visible anywhere. The architecture looked like something from a museum. Captain Lee Doyen stood waiting on the landing pad, hands clasped behind his back. He wore a simple gray uniform with minimal decoration despite the rank insignia indicating he was their primary instructor. He was average height for a human, with dark hair cut very short and eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. Beside him stood Lieutenant Park Minso, a female human with similar bearing and the same watchful expression. The cadets disembarked, each adjusting to the planet's gravity and air composition in their own way. Crix felt like he was moving through thick syrup. Every step required conscious effort. Fane strode forward confidently, pleased that he barely noticed the difference. Yura's suit injected extra moisture to compensate for the dry mountain air. Welcome to the Terran Military Academy, Captain Lee said, his voice calm and level. I am Captain Lee Doyen. This is Lieutenant Park Mino. For the next 6 months, we will be your instructors in ground combat, survival, and tactical operations. Ground combat, Crix whispered to Tyne. Do humans still fight on the ground? Most civilized species use orbital platforms and drone warfare. Tyne shrugged, clearly unimpressed. Primitive species cling to primitive methods. If Captain Lee heard the comment, he gave no sign. Follow me to the orientation hall. Your quarters have been prepared according to each species' environmental requirements. You will have 2 hours to settle in. Before the first briefing, the group followed the 2 humans through the compound. Everything was built low and solid, designed to withstand weather rather than demonstrate technological advancement. Other human soldiers moved through the area with purpose, each one carrying equipment or engaged in various tasks. None of them used hover platforms. or transportation devices, they simply walked everywhere. This facility was built in the Rocky Mountains, Lieutenant Park explained as they walked. Elevation is approximately 2,000 m above sea level. You may notice the air is thinner here than at sea level. Your bodies will adapt within a few days. Yura was already breathing harder, her gills working overtime to extract oxygen from air that seemed inadequate. Crix noticed that the humans showed no signs of exertion at all, despite maintaining a pace that was making him struggle. The orientation hall was a large room with simple chairs arranged in rows. A holographic projector sat at the front, at least indicating some level of technology. The cadets took their seats, various limbs and body configurations finding awkward accommodations in furniture clearly designed for human proportions. Captain Lee activated the projector, showing images of the surrounding terrain. This academy focuses on skills that technology cannot replace: physical endurance, mental resilience, adaptability to changing conditions, and small unit tactics. While the coalition military relies heavily on technology, we believe a soldier's greatest weapon is here. He tapped his head, and here he placed a hand over his heart. The next hours were filled with briefings about safety protocols, communication systems, and schedule expectations. The cadets learned they would wake at 500 hours, train until 1,200 hours, break for midday meal, then continue training until 1,800 hours, 6 days per week with one rest day. That is 14 hours of waking activity, Voss said through his translator, clearly confused. Most species require more rest cycles. You will adapt, Lieutenant Park said. Simply, humans evolved with a 24-hour day cycle. Our training reflects this natural rhythm. When the briefing ended, Captain Lee led them through equipment distribution. Each cadet received a backpack, sleeping system, water containers, and various other items. When Crix tried to lift his pack, he nearly toppled backward. The weight was enormous. How heavy is this? He demanded, his tentacles straining. 2 kg, Captain Lee replied. Standard light load for human soldiers. Your species load has been adjusted to equivalent body mass ratio. This is not light, Crix protested. You will become stronger, the captain said, and Crix could not tell if it was encouragement or simply a statement of fact. That evening, the cadets gathered in the common area, exhausted from simply existing on this heavy, oxygen-poor world. They had not even begun real training yet. I heard human military history is filled with unusual tactics, Rand said, his antenna twitching. They once defeated superior forces through sheer stubbornness. Stubbornness is not a military strategy, Tyne said dismissively. Tomorrow we will show these humans what real warriors can do. Through the window, they could see Captain Lee and Lieutenant Park outside, running laps around the compound as the sun set. Neither one looked tired. They moved with easy rhythmic grace that suggested they could continue indefinitely. Crix watched them and felt something unfamiliar stir in his mind. It might have been respect. It might have been concern. He was not sure which. Tomorrow will be interesting, he said quietly. None of them knew how right he was. The alarm sounded at exactly 500 hours, a harsh electronic tone that dragged the alien cadets from their sleep cycles. Crix had only been asleep for 4 hours by his species standards. His body felt sluggish and unresponsive. As he dragged himself from the sleeping pod around the dormitory, similar sounds of distress echoed from the other cadets. "This is inhumane," Voss complained. Through his suit's translator, his methane-filled chamber clouded with condensation. 5 hours of sleep is not sufficient. Recovery time. Fane stretched his massive frame, trying to appear unaffected, though even he looked tired. Warriors endured discomfort. This is nothing. They gathered in the dining facility where human soldiers were already eating breakfast with practiced efficiency. The food provided for the aliens had been specially prepared according to each species' dietary requirements, but Crix noticed the portion seemed smaller than he was used to. Captain Lee entered the dining hall, looking exactly as fresh and alert as he had the previous evening. He wore the same simple combat uniform, and on his back was a large pack that bulged with equipment. Lieutenant Park followed, similarly equipped. "Good morning," Captain Lee said, his voice carrying easily across the room. "I hope you all slept well. Today we begin physical conditioning. We will be doing a light hike through the surrounding terrain to familiarize you with the environment." Crix exchanged glances with the other cadets. Hiking. That was what ancient species did before they developed transportation technology. Even the poorest colonies used hover platforms or automated vehicles for moving across distances. "How far is this hike?" Real asked his translator, making his clicking sounds into words. 15 km, Captain Lee replied. "A simple Altanback route that will let you see the mountain environment. Should take about 6 hours with breaks." 15 km, Yura's voice carried disbelief. "My species typically travels such distances using water current systems or vehicles. Today you will walk," Lieutenant Park said, her tone leaving no room for discussion. "Packs are waiting outside. Everyone will carry appropriate loads. Meet at the trail head in 15 minutes. The packs were heavy, desperately heavy. Crix used 3 of his 4 tentacle limbs to hoist his onto his back and immediately felt his body protesting. The straps dug into his flesh, designed for human shoulders that did not exist on his body. Around him, the other cadets struggled with similar problems, only things seemed relatively comfortable. His heavy world muscles handling them with less difficulty. "This is manageable," he announced proudly. "My species carries heavier loads regularly." Captain Lee checked each cadet's pack, adjusting straps and distribution. His own pack looked twice as heavy as theirs, yet he moved as if wearing nothing at all. "The trail begins here," he said, pointing to a dirt path leading into the forest. "We maintain a steady pace, no stopping except at designated checkpoints. Stay in formation. If you experience medical emergency, alert us immediately." They started walking. For the first few minutes it seemed easy enough. The trail was relatively flat, winding through trees that blocked the early morning sun. Crix found a rhythm, his tentacles working in coordination to propel him forward. Tyne set a fast pace at the front of the group, determined to prove his species' superiority. But the weight never stopped pressing down. With each step, Crix felt gravity pulling at his pack, at his body, at everything. On Veloth he could have bounded along for hours. Here each movement required conscious effort. His Breathing became labored, his limbs burning with exertion he had never experienced before. After 2 km the terrain changed, the trail began. Climbing upward, following the mountain slope, what had been manageable walking became a struggle against elevation. Each step now fought both the weight on their backs and the incline of the path. Lieutenant Park jogged past the line of cadets, moving backward with easy grace to check on everyone. She was not even breathing hard, looking good, she called out encouragingly. The first climb is always the hardest. Yura was making wet gasping sounds, her gills flaring wide as they tried to extract oxygen from air that seemed to grow thinner with each meter of elevation gained. The moisture system in her suit worked overtime, but the dry mountain air was stealing water from her body faster than it could be replaced. Voss's environmental suit began emitting warning beeps. His internal temperature was rising from the exertion, and the suit's cooling systems were struggling to compensate. Methane species were not designed for sustained physical activity in Earth's normal atmosphere. By kilometer 5, the confident group that had started the hike had become a straggling line of exhausted aliens. Crick's tentacles were trembling with effort, his body designed for low-gravity environments where movement was effortless, screamed in protest at this sustained torture. Captain, Cricks called out, his voice request permission to rest. Captain Lee checked his wrist device, which showed their pace and distance. C point is at kilometer 8. We rest there. Maintain formation and continue. But we need to stop now, Cricks insisted. No, you want to stop now, Lee replied calmly, still walking at the same steady pace he had maintained since the beginning. There is a difference. You are capable of continuing. Your biology is not in danger. You are simply experiencing discomfort. Tyne, who had been so confident at the start, was now at the middle of the pack, his heavy world muscles built for explosive power and short bursts of activity were not designed for this endless grinding endurance. His species hunters killed quickly and efficiently, using overwhelming force. They did not chase prey for hours across terrain. The realization was starting to dawn on all of them. This was not a difficult hike by human standards. Captain Lee and Lieutenant Park showed no signs of fatigue whatsoever. They moved with mechanical consistency, their breathing steady, their pace unwavering. Meanwhile, the supposed elite warriors of 5 different species were being broken by a light hike. At kilometer 7, Realm stumbled and fell, his insectoid legs buckling under the combined weight and exhaustion. Lieutenant Park was there instantly, helping him up with surprising gentleness. Can you continue, she asked. I must, Realm said, pride forcing him forward. Then we continue together, she said, and matched her pace to his slower one without complaint. Finally, mercifully, they reached the checkpoint at kilometer 8. Small clearing beside a stream offered flat ground and the sound of running water. The cadets collapsed immediately, various limbs and body parts sprawling in ungraceful heaps. Captain Lee and Lieutenant Park remained standing, barely winded. Lee pulled out water containers and distributed them. Park simply stood with hands on hips, looking like she could start running up the mountain at any moment. 10-minute rest, Captain Lee announced. Drink water, check your equipment. Second half is more challenging. Cricks looked at the captain with something approaching horror. More Challenging, he was not sure his body could continue at all. Around him, the other cadets wore similar expressions of dismay. They had traveled only 8 kilometers, 7 more remained, and somehow, impossibly, the humans were not even tired. The 10 minutes passed far too quickly. Crix had barely caught his breath when Captain Lee stood and gestured for everyone to prepare to move again. Every part of his body hurt in ways he hadn't known were possible. The pack seemed to have doubled in weight during the rest period. Before we continue, Lee said, standing at the edge of the clearing, I want you to understand something about human physiology, Lieutenant Park. Please explain. Park stepped forward, pulling out a small data pad. Humans evolved as persistent hunters. Do you know what that means? The cadets stared blankly. Reland's antennae twitched with curiosity despite his exhaustion. It means our ancestors hunted by chasing prey until it died of exhaustion, Park continued. An antelope or deer could run faster than a human. It could sprint away and disappear, but humans would follow for hours, sometimes for days. We tracked it, jogged after it, never stopping. Eventually, the prey would overheat, collapse and die, then we would eat. That is barbaric, Yura said, her gills fluttering with distress. That is evolution, Captain Lee said. Simply, humans can sweat. We dump heat through our skin constantly, which means we can run for hours without overheating. Most species cannot do this. Your bodies overheat quickly and you must stop to cool down. Things shifted uncomfortably. His species did exactly that. Heavy world predators could move with incredible power, but only in short bursts. Extended activity caused dangerous overheating. Human legs and spine are designed for bipedal distance travel, Park continued. Our cardiovascular system is extremely efficient at delivering oxygen. Our feet have arches that act like springs, storing and releasing energy with each step, and our brains are wired to push through discomfort when necessary. You are showing off, Voss said accusingly through his translator. No, Lee replied, we are explaining why this is a light hike for us but difficult for you. Understanding your limitations helps you overcome them. Now let us continue. The second half of the journey was worse than the first. The trail began climbing steeply, switching back and forth across the mountainside. Rocks jutted from the path, requiring careful foot placement. Small streams cut across the trail, forcing them to jump or wade through cold water. For Six, the rocky sections were nightmarish. His tentacle limbs perfect for grasping and manipulating objects in low gravity could not find perches on the sharp stones. He slipped repeatedly, scraping his flesh against rough surfaces. Each time Lieutenant Park appeared beside him, offering a steady hand without judgment or impatience. Yura faced different challenges. Despite being amphibious, her species lived in calm waters and smooth riverbeds. The rushing mountain streams had strong currents that threatened to sweep her away. She needed help crossing each one, which damaged her pride almost as much as her body. Voss's suit began showing more serious warnings. A seal had cracked slightly, allowing Earth's oxygen nitrogen atmosphere to contaminate his methane environment. Park stopped to repair it with a patch kit, working quickly and efficiently while the group waited. How can you do this? Voss asked her, his translator making his exhaustion Evident you are not even breathing. Hard. Practice Park said simply, I have been hiking since I was a child. My body knows how to do this efficiently. Yours will learn to given time. At kilometer 12 disaster struck. Fane, who had been pushing himself hard to maintain his proud reputation, stepped wrong on a loose rock. His massive body came down awkwardly, and something in his ankle made a sound that needed no translation. He fell heavily, his face contorting with pain. Captain Lee was beside him in seconds, examining the injury with practiced hands. Twisted ankle, possibly worse. Can you put weight on it? Tyne tried and failed, his gray skin going pale with pain. I can continue, he insisted stubbornly. You will injure it worse, Lee said. We can call for medical evacuation if needed. The word evacuation hung in the air like a challenge. To quit now would mean admitting defeat. Tyne looked at the captain, then at his fellow cadets. Every one of them was suffering. Every one of them wanted to quit, but none of them would be the first. I will continue, Tyne said through gritted teeth. Just slower. Lee nodded as if he had expected nothing less. He adjusted Tyne's pack, redistributing the weight and fashioning a support for the injured ankle using straps and padding. Lieutenant Park will stay with you. Move at whatever pace you can manage. The rest of us will continue and prepare the summit checkpoint. They split into two groups. Crix found himself in the lead group with Captain Lee along with Relm and Voss. Yura stayed with Park and Tyne, forming the slower group. The final 3 km were the steepest yet. The trail became more rocks than dirt, climbing almost vertically in places. Crix's tentacles found surprising advantages here. Gripping hand holds that human hands might have struggled with, but they weight on his back made every pull upward an agony. Lee climbed ahead of them, and now Crix could observe the human's technique. Every movement was efficient, no wasted energy. The captain's breathing remained steady and rhythmic, following a pattern that matched his steps. His boots found the best footholds automatically, as if his feet had their own intelligence. How long could you do this? Crix gasped out between breaths. Do what? Lee asked, not even turning around. Hike, walk, whatever you call this. Torture? Lee paused, considering the question seriously. I once carried a wounded soldier 40 km through hostile territory. Took 3 days with minimal rest. He survived because I kept moving. 3 days. Crix could barely imagine it. Humans have crossed entire continents on foot, Lee continued, resuming his steady climb. Before we had vehicles, walking was how we explored our world. Some humans still do ultramarathons for recreation, 100 km or more just running. For the challenge of it, that is insane. Relm clicked weakly. Perhaps, Lee agreed, but it is also human. We are not the strongest species, not the fastest, not the smartest in many ways, but we do not stop. When everyone else gives up, humans keep going. That is our advantage. They reached the summit as the sun approached its highest point. The mountaintop offered a flat area with panoramic views of the surrounding ranges. Crix collapsed immediately, his tentacles unable to support his weight any longer. Voss sat heavily, his suit venting excess heat in visible waves. Roland simply lay on his back, his wings spread flat. Captain Lee set down his pack, pulled out water and food supplies, and began preparing the checkpoint. He moved with the same steady energy he had shown at the beginning, as if the climb had cost him nothing. 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Park appeared over the ridge, supporting Tyne on one side, while Yura struggled up on the other. They all collapsed when they reached the flat area. 30 a nut. Rest, Lee announced. You have earned it. Crix looked out at the view. Mountain ranges stretched in every direction, their peaks covered in snow that glinted in the sunlight. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way that seemed very human. They were only halfway through the hike. They still had to go back down. Captain Lee distributed food packets while the cadets recovered on the summit. The items were simple: dried meats, nuts, dried fruits, and blocks of something called chocolate. Crix examined his ration with tired curiosity. These are very dense in calories, he observed, checking the nutrition information printed on the package. One of these packs contains enough energy for 3 meals by my species standards. Humans need a lot of energy, Lieutenant Park said, sitting cross-legged on a flat rock. She was eating her own rations with steady efficiency. Endurance activity burns calories quickly. A human soldier on extended operations can consume 5,000 calories per day and still lose weight. That is excessive, Voss commented, his suit finally stabilizing after the climb. Most intelligent species have efficient metabolisms that require less fuel. Efficient for what? Lee asked, the question hanging in the air. Metabolism optimized for sitting. Climate-controlled environments is very different from one designed for sustained physical activity. Humans evolved to move constantly, walking, running, climbing, swimming. Our bodies expect activity and suffer without it. Tyne sat with his injured ankle elevated, looking out at the mountain ranges. His pride had taken as much damage as his body. On my home world, warriors prove themselves through feats of strength, lifting great weights, breaking stone with our hands, fast, powerful demonstrations of force, and those are valuable skills, Lee acknowledged. In a static defense or a direct assault, your species would dominate, but war is not always about single moments of strength. Sometimes it is about who can keep fighting after everyone else has collapsed. You are talking about attrition warfare, Realm said, his translator making the observation sound like an accusation. Most modern military doctrine considers that wasteful and barbaric. Most modern military doctrine was written by species who have technology to compensate for physical limitations, Park replied. She stood and walked to the edge of the summit, gesturing at the wilderness below. But what happens when technology fails? When your orbital support is destroyed, your vehicles are disabled, your supply lines are cut. What happens when you have to move 40 km through enemy territory with no support? The question answered itself. The cadets were experiencing exactly what would happen. They would fail. Their bodies were not designed for it. Crix had a sudden memory of his military history studies. The Terran Wars, when humans first encountered the Galactic Coalition. The records described human forces as primitive and under-equipped, fighting with outdated weapons against superior technology, yet somehow humans had fought the Coalition's military to a standstill. In the Terran Wars, Crix said slowly, thinking through the historical records, Coalition command reported strange human tactics. Humans would attack, then retreat before reinforcements arrived. then attack again somewhere else, then retreat again. It continued for weeks. Coalition soldiers could not get rest. Because humans kept coming. Guerrilla warfare, Lee said, nodding. Small unit tactics combined with mobility. Human soldiers would march 20 km to attack a target, then march 20 km in a different direction to avoid counterattack, then do it again the next night. Coalition forces could not keep up because they depended on vehicles and forward bases. You exhausted them, Yura said, understanding dawning in her large eyes. Like your ancestors hunted animals, you chased the coalition military until it collapsed. We did what we do best, Lee said simply. We kept moving when everyone else needed to stop. Park pulled out a small data pad and called up information. Let me show you some statistics. Average human soldier can march 30 km per day, carrying 25 kg for weeks at a time. Some of Earth's ancient armies crossed thousands of kilometers on foot. Roman legions, Mongol warriors, Napoleon's Grand Army, they walked across continents, but that was before technology. Tyne protested weakly. Technology has not changed human biology, Lee said. A modern human soldier with powered armor is certainly more dangerous than an ancient human with a spear, but take away the armor, and the modern soldier can still do what the ancient one did: march all day, fight when needed, march again the next day. Can your species do that without technology? The question was not rhetorical. Each cadet mentally reviewed their own capabilities. Crix knew the answer for his people: without anti-gravity assistance or vehicles, Velians could barely move in standard gravity for more than a few hours before exhaustion made them helpless. This is why the coalition wanted this training. Partnership, Voss said, his translator, conveying both understanding and dismay. You are teaching us to be more like humans. We are teaching you to be more adaptable. Park corrected. Your species are not humans and will never have human endurance, but you can improve. You can learn to push past your first feeling of tiredness. You can train your cardiovascular systems to work more efficiently. You can build mental resilience. The body and mind are connected, Lee added. He walked over to where Tyne sat with his injured ankle. Your injury is painful, yes, but you are still here. You chose to continue rather than request evacuation. That choice came from your mind, not your body. Your body wanted to stop. Your mind said no. My mind is currently reconsidering that decision, Tyne admitted, but there was something like humor in his voice now. The rest period ended too quickly, as all rest periods do. Lee began preparing everyone for the descent, adjusting packs and checking equipment. The walk down would be different from the climb up, but not easier. Descending is harder on joints and requires different balance. Park explained. Gravity pulls you forward and down. You must resist it constantly. Your leg muscles will work differently than they did climbing up. She was absolutely correct. Within minutes of starting down, Crix discovered new varieties of muscle pain. His tentacles had to act as brakes, holding his body back against gravity's pull. Each step jarred his body as weight transferred awkwardly through limbs not designed for this motion. The humans predictably descended with easy grace. Their knee joints absorbed the impacts. Their ankles flexed naturally to find stable footing. Lee even managed to support Tyne partially, helping the injured Cadet navigate the rocky trail while still maintaining steady pace. How do human joints not break? Yura asked, watching in amazement as Park bounded down a steep section that the amphibian was having to carefully crawl down. Backward. Our skeletal structure evolved for this, Park called back. Arched feet, specific knee angle, spinal curves that absorb shock. Humans are literally built to walk and run long distances on varied terrain. The sun was lowering toward the horizon when they finally reached the flatter sections of trail. The last 5 km stretched ahead of them, seeming impossibly long after the previous hours of torment. Crick's tentacles were beyond pain now, entering some numb state where they simply moved automatically. But something had changed in the group. They moved closer together now, supporting each other without being asked. When Voss's suit began overheating again, Realm used his wings to fan cool air over it despite his own exhaustion. When Yura stumbled, Crick steadied her with a tentacle without thinking about it. You are working as a unit now, Lee observed, watching them with what might have been approval. That is good. That is what we want you to learn. The academy compound appeared ahead like a vision of paradise. Lights were coming on as evening approached. The smell of food drifted from the dining facility. Other human soldiers moved about their duties, glancing at the returning group. With knowing expressions, they crossed the final 100 m and entered the compound. At 1900 hours, 14 hours after beginning the hike, 30 km total distance covered, the alien cadets looked like survivors of a disaster, various limbs and appendages hanging limp with exhaustion. Captain Lee and Lieutenant Park looked exactly as fresh as they had at the beginning. The dining facility was warm and well lit, a stark contrast to the cold mountain trail they had just survived. Other human soldiers applauded as the alien cadets limped inside, their various sounds and gestures conveying respect across species barriers. Not bad for your first light hike, one soldier called out, and several others laughed in a way that was not quite mocking but not quite kind either. Crix collapsed into a chair, specially modified for his body type, and simply sat there, too exhausted to even pursue food. Around him, the other cadets were in similar states of complete depletion. Only the humans moved with energy, getting food and water, talking casually as if they had spent the day doing paperwork instead of hiking 30 kilometers through mountains. Captain Lee approached their table carrying a tray loaded with various foods suitable for each species. He set it down and began distributing portions with the same steady efficiency he showed in everything. Eat, he said. Simply, your bodies need fuel to recover. Tomorrow will be another training day. Tomorrow. Voss's translator conveyed pure horror. We must do this again tomorrow. No, Lee said, and relief flooded through the group. Tomorrow is classroom instruction and equipment maintenance. The next hike is in 3 days. The relief evaporated instantly. 3 days was not nearly enough time to recover from this ordeal. Crix looked at his food, trying to summon the energy to eat. His tentacles trembled as they lifted utensils. Lieutenant Park sat down with them, her own tray filled with portions that would have fed 2 of Crix's people. I know today was hard, she said, her voice more gentle than it had been on the trail. I know your bodies hurt in ways you did not know were possible, but I want you to understand something important. She paused, making sure she had everyone's attention, even exhausted. The cadets listened. What you did today was exceptional, Park continued. 15 km up a mountain and 15 km back down in terrain you have never experienced, in gravity that is not natural for most of you, carrying weight you are not used to, and every single one of you finished. You did not quit. That matters more than how fast you did it or how much you struggled, but you were not struggling, Tyne said, his voice bitter despite the kindness in Park's words. You and the captain moved like it was nothing. We are supposed to be elite warriors from our respective species, and a simple hike broke us. It was not a simple hike, Lee said, joining them at the table. It was simple for us because we have trained our entire lives for this, but for you, that was one of the hardest physical challenges you have ever faced, and you faced it. That is what being a warrior means. He pulled out his data pad and showed them statistics from the day's trek: heart rates, oxygen consumption, energy expenditure. The numbers were shocking. Each of the alien cadets had pushed into physiological danger zones multiple times. Your bodies were telling you to stop, Lee explained. They were sending panic signals, pain signals, warning signals, but you kept moving. Anyway, that is not physical strength. That is mental strength. That is what we are teaching you here. Rilin's antenna drooped with exhaustion, but he clicked a question. Why does the Galactic Coalition need this? We have technology. We have weapons that can destroy planets. Why do we need to learn to walk up mountains? Because technology fails, Park said firmly. Ships malfunction, weapons break, communication is lost. When everything else is gone, you still have your body and your mind. If those are strong enough, you can survive. You can complete the mission. You can save lives. She gestured at Captain Lee. Captain once carried a wounded soldier 40 km through hostile territory. The soldier's name was Sergeant Kim Taeyang. His vehicle had been destroyed. His legs were broken and enemy forces controlled the area. No orbital support was available. No extraction was possible. So Captain Lee put the sergeant on his back and walked for 3 days through enemy terrain until they reached friendly lines. Lee looked uncomfortable with the attention. Any soldier would have done the same. That is the thing, Park said, looking at each of the alien cadets in turn. Any human soldier would have done the same because we train for it. We prepare for the worst situations. We make our bodies and minds strong enough to do the impossible when necessary. That is what you are learning here. Crix ate slowly, his mind working through implications. His species had always relied on technology and intelligence. Physical challenges were solved with tools, not endurance. But what Park was describing was a different philosophy entirely, a philosophy that said the individual body and mind were the most important tools. Anv said quietly, we have a saying. Intelligent being adapts the environment to suit himself, but I am beginning to think humans have a different saying. We do, Lee said. The strong being adapts himself to suit the environment. Both approaches have value, but in war, in crisis, in survival situations, the second approach often matters more. The meal continued with slowly growing conversation. The cadets asked questions about human training, human history, human capabilities. Lee and Park answered patiently, neither boasting nor diminishing the truth. How long until We can do what you do, Yura asked her, voice carrying genuine curiosity now. Instead of resentment, you will never do exactly what we do, Lee said honestly. Your biology is different, but in 6 months you will be able to do things you currently think are impossible. You will hike 20 km and feel tired instead of destroyed. You will carry heavier packs. You will move faster. Your bodies will adapt because bodies are designed to adapt. That is how evolution works. And your minds will be stronger, Park added. Today you learned that being tired does not mean being finished, that pain does not equal damage, that you can continue when you think you cannot. Those are lessons worth more than any weapon. The meal ended and the cadets began moving toward their quarters, walking with the careful steps of people who had discovered new limits. As they left, Crick saw Captain Lee and Lieutenant Park heading toward the door leading outside. Where are you going? He asked, already suspecting the answer. Evening training run, Park said cheerfully, just a light 5 km to cool down from the day. You are joking, Crick said weakly. No joke, Lee replied, and there might have been the smallest hint of a smile. Human soldiers train twice per day, morning and evening. The body responds best to consistent stimulus. They left and through the window. 6 watched them begin jogging into the darkness, their movements synchronized and effortless. Behind him, time made a sound that was part laugh and part groan. They are monsters, the heavy worlder said, but there was admiration in his voice now. They are humans, Voss corrected, which might be the same thing. Crix made his way to his quarters. Every movement an exercise in pain management. His sleeping pod looked more inviting than anything he had ever seen. But before sleeping, he opened his personal log and began recording. Day 1 of integrated training complete. He dictated initial assessment was incorrect. Humans are not primitive. They have simply maintained capabilities that most species bred out of themselves. When we developed technology, where we chose tools, they chose endurance. Where we chose efficiency, they chose resilience. He paused, trying to find the right words for what he was feeling. The captain said this was a light hike. I now understand this was not a joke or exaggeration. By human standards, 30 km. With light packs truly is routine. This means their definition of a hard hike is something I cannot yet imagine, but I will imagine it eventually, because in 3 days we do this again, and the day after that, and for 6 months. He paused again, tentacles aching even at rest. I think I understand now why humans won the Terran Wars. It was not technology or tactics, though those helped. They won because they simply did not stop when coalition forces needed rest and resupply. Humans kept moving when any rational being would have surrendered. Humans kept fighting. They are persistent hunters applied to warfare. Crix closed the log and collapsed into his sleeping pod. His last thought before exhaustion claimed him was simple and profound. Humans are terrifying, and I am grateful. They are allies. In the morning, the alarm would sound. Atro 500 hours again. There would be more training, more challenges, more lessons in endurance that his body was not designed for, but Crix found himself almost looking forward to it. Almost outside, Captain Lee and Lieutenant Park completed their 5 km run and barely broke a sweat. They checked the schedule for tomorrow's training, made notes about each cadet's performance, and prepared for another day of teaching. Aliens what it meant to be human, they will make good soldiers, Park observed. They already are good soldiers, Lee replied. We are just teaching them to be better ones. They walked back to their quarters as the mountain night settled in. Two humans who had spent the day doing what their species had done for millions of years, moving forward, never stopping, enduring.